All right, we're recording.
What? Are you launching it from your page or the human trafficking page?
Probably the human trafficking page.
All right, let me know when it's up, and I'll start watching it for viewers.
Yeah, I'll share it.
Are you sharing to the Bikers Against Abuse page, Heather?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you, sweetie.
You're welcome.
How come Scott's not on camera?
Oh, because he needs to protect his identity.
Oh.
Chris is the face.
Of the company. What are you drinking, Chris?
Huh?
What are you drinking? A vegan drink?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm drinking.
You should go through a drive-through with this guy. I'm gonna get a mango smoothie with a little avocado on the side, but not too much avocado.
That's not at all what happened.
And please blend it well because I don't want it to be too clumpy.
That is definitely not what happened. But hold on, guys. I'm trying to. All right.
I want my bran muffin lightly toasted, not too.
I'll save my comments for later. All right, we're going.
Are we up and rolling?
Yes.
Take a sip of his spinach drink.
And we're recording, by the way. So.
Okay, well, your spinach drink. Hey, look, just because you like drinking raw spinach, seaweed, grass clipping with ice doesn't make you a bad person.
Hey, you're good to go ahead and share it.
I'm sharing now.
Great.
We got 2 whole viewers right now. I think one of them is me.
Hey, look,
Floor.
just because you like drinking. Why is this thing lagging?
I don't know. Hold on. Give me a sec.
Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing?
How are you?
We got a whole bunch of, like, 7 whole people watching right now.
Oh, all right. You're monitoring the one on Facebook, right?
Yep.
Awesome.
I am from our page.
I'm getting there.
All right, let me know when you're up, and we'll go ahead and get cracking on this.
All right.
So when she shares it on their page, it just shows how many viewers they have and their comments.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna.
Ours shows ours and our comments.
So hey, when y'all share it, make sure you're commenting and putting your link to your website so they can come to you as well, and you do the same thing, Scott.
I should probably just watch theirs.
Yeah.
How many viewers y'all got on yours, Heather?
I see 7. I'm getting there though.
Okay. I mean, honestly, we can go ahead and start. That way we're not wasting time, and they can always come back and watch it because we, again, are recording it.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and do this. All right. Hey, everybody. We're going to go ahead and introduce ourselves. I'm Chris Levine. I'm the director of the Human Trafficking Response Team. Paul, you want to go ahead?
I'm Paul Libri. I am the founder of Bikers Against Abuse International.
Scott, don't do it again.
All right. I know. Last time I was told I gave a horrible introduction. So my name is Scott. I'm a private investigator here in Georgia. I am also the chief of operations for the Human Trafficking Response Team, and I volunteer with my buddy Paul here at Bikers Against Abuse as much as I can to help those guys out.
All right, Heather.
And I'm Heather, and I'm the internet investigator with Bikers Against Abuse, as well as founder of Threads and Voices of Serenity.
All right, all right. Hey, everybody, we're going to talk about human trafficking and how it affects our borders, and how it impacts our everyday life. Uh, Before we begin, I'd like to put out that we're not here to discuss politics, so I would really appreciate people keep that off the page. That's not what we're here for. Our goal is to teach you about human trafficking, and anybody caught talking about something other than the subject we're talking about will be removed. All right, so first we're going to start off with where human trafficking comes from. And a lot of people have an impression that human trafficking uh, really kind of happens maybe overseas, or people are mostly taken from home overseas, which is kind of true, but it's not completely true. What happens is human trafficking is all over the world. It's a global network, and it makes billions and billions of dollars every year. It generates a lot of money, and here in the United States, it's really, really bad. And a lot of people also have an impression that human trafficking is just sex, but it's not. It's a lot deeper than that. It's labor. So yes, slavery does exist. Labor trafficking is a big deal. They'll bring people over to our country, or they snatch up runaways from our country, and they'll put them to work for little to no money, and then they're stuck in that life. They get all the benefits from it. Also, you have sex trafficking, which is pretty much well known. But sex trafficking is not just little kids. It's males, females, any age, from young to very old, to any gender, any sexual preference. It doesn't matter. People are used. If they can get you, they're going to get you. And it's also organ harvesting, which is another one people don't really talk about. Organ harvesting is a pretty dark thing. It's, people with a lot of money don't want to be on a waiting list for an organ, so they buy it off the black market. Well, where do you think the black market gets their organs from?
Right.
Traffickers, people that maybe are forgotten, running away, people who are, walking through a dark alley by themselves, maybe intoxicated, not in their right mind, get snatched up. Before you know it, it's over. You hear a lot of stuff like that in movies, but it's those are movies. That's not really relatable. It gets a lot deeper than that. And
Right.
You also have drug trafficking as well, which ties into human trafficking, because sometimes traffickers will remove a person's organs and maybe replace it with a bag of drugs to sneak them across the border. And when they get there, they get cut back open. And this happens so many times, till they can't take it anymore and they're gone. So we're gonna, now that you know what it is and kind of where it comes from, you need to know it comes from all over the world. So there's human trafficking coming from the United States going outside the country, and there's human trafficking happening coming from other countries into the United States, which is why our borders are being affected, which is why certain decisions may be happening that you may not agree with, but there's things happening behind the scenes that people really don't understand, and we'll probably touch on that. But before we continue, I think it would be a good idea to go ahead and talk about the statistics of human trafficking in the borders. And Scott, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, I got some numbers for everybody, but here's the problem with all the numbers that you can find online. These numbers are from 2016. So any kind of statistic you look up on human trafficking is always 3 to 4 years old, because it takes so long to calculate the devastation of what all goes on with human trafficking. This goes back from 2016. An estimated 40.3 million people are involved in modern day slavery, including 24.9 million being forced into labor, 15.4 million people being forced into marriage, 5.4 victims of modern slavery for every 1,000 people in the world. So 5.5 people for every 1,000 people in the world are victims of modern day slavery. 1 in 4 victims of modern day slavery are children. Out of 24.9 million people that are trapped into forced labor, 16 million people are exploited for private sectors such as domestic work, construction, agriculture, stuff like that. 4.8 million people are forced into sexual exploitation. 4 million of those forced or I lost my place. All right, so anyway, women and children are disproportionately affected by forced labor and accounting for 99% of the victims in commercial sex industry and 58% in other sectors. So that's just, I mean, you got over 40 million people in the world that are affected by it.
Yep, it's a huge deal. Does anybody have anything to add?
I know that I did see that, you know, obviously, of course, a lot of the traffickers, you know, they're not caught, they're not prosecuted. And I did see a number that in 2018, only 526 traffickers were convicted.
Wow.
It's actually a big deal. There's a lot of traffickers getting away with a ton, and I know Bikers Against Abuse can attest to that. There's trafficking is not just, you know, what people see like people being abducted. It's prostitution as well. And Paul, I know you have some experience with that.
You know, what amazed me was back in the early 2000s, we started with an organization out of the central United States looking for missing children. And I would never have ever thought that so many missing kids wind up in a sex trafficking trade.
Yep.
And the first case that we actually did was in Atlanta. And it was just so lucky that within 6 hours of us taking the case, we found the girl. But the girl was actually found by this old, she was 14. The gentleman that found her was in his 20s. And he was on that app called Kick. And he promoted himself to her on Kick as, you know, a 14, 15-year-old boy, wanted to meet up with her at the skate park in Atlanta. And, you know, he Romeo'd her, and she left, and she wound up going with the guy. Now, she wasn't your per se sex trafficking case, but she wound up going with him and spending a few days with him, and later she was found. Well, as soon as we found her, and I was excited we found her, we canceled a second case, and this girl was out of Cartersville, Georgia. And it was the same kind of scenario. Found her on Facebook, talked to her on Facebook. Hey, you know, my dad's on the way with me. He's gonna come pick you up, and we'll hang out. A few hours later, a girl gets to our house in Cartersville, picks her up, says, "Hey, my brother's at home. I'm gonna pick you up, and we'll go hang out with my brother." They wind up at Walmart. This lady buys her some beers. The girl drinks some beers. Next thing you know, she's drank Molly, and she's drank G, and by that nighttime, she's on heroin, she's on Molly, she's at a club in Atlanta. Fast forward 3 or 4 days, she is on Cheshire Bridge Road being pimped out, Bolton Industrial Boulevard being pimped out, Camp Creek Parkway being pimped out, Old National Highway. So they were running through this girl like crazy. And a lot of people are like, well, why don't they just run? Well, they don't run for one of two reasons. Number one is they get these girls so high that they don't even realize what their name is, where they are, what time of day it is. Or number two, they do the guerrilla pimping. And the guerrilla pimping being either they'll burn them with cigarettes, with hot iron, beat them senseless, tell them they're going to kill their family. Don't run to the police because the police are on our side. The police know what's going on, and they'll bring you back here, and we'll kill you and your family when they do. And that's guerrilla pimping. If the girls get too mouthy about it, don't want to cooperate, or whatever the case may be, one or two things happen. One of them not being they let them go. Number one is they transport them somewhere else. So either they'll transport them to New York, California, or Florida. From there, they're going to wind up overseas. Once they're overseas, good luck, it's over with. Or number two, they take them somewhere down I-20, put a bullet in them, throw them in a ditch, and it's done. That's just the harsh reality of human trafficking. It's a big business. It's big money. People don't realize that it's not like it was back in the day. It's not the guy standing outside the car with the nice rims on it. He's got a gold chain around his neck. He looks like Pimp Daddy. That's not it anymore. They're sold online. Backpage used to be our worst nightmare. You could buy anything on Backpage, and other sites have popped up since then. I'm not going to give the names of those sites, but other sites have popped up since then where you can go online and you can buy whatever you want. You can put an age category in and it pops up. You pay with your credit card or Cash App or whatever other way there is. And they deliver them to your hotel room, your vehicle, whatever the case may be. It's not, no girl wakes up. I mean, you see prostitutes walking down Fulton Industrial, all these, any place in the United States. These girls, 99%, didn't wake up one day and say, hey, I want to be a prostitute. 99% of them were missing children at one time and got thrown into this. The other 1%, and I'm going from statistics back in 2005, but the other 1% was your girls that got on drugs and didn't have a place to go, and that they turned into that lifestyle. But it's staggering to know that 99% of them were missing and exploited children, and they could never get back out of that trade. And if they try, they get sold from pimp to pimp to pimp to pimp, and it's a lifelong process to the point that they don't even know who they are. They got so many warrants now, they're not going to go back to where they are. And the other thing, and I know Chris mentioned this in his other video last week, was, and Heather had to hit on it too, was they're scared to go to the law because unfortunately when they get caught, they're in trouble too. And that's something that really needs to change because, you know, here you are being sex trafficked, you're being made to prostitute yourself, and then you find that scapegoat of, oh my God, here's a police officer, let me go tell him. Next thing you know, you're in the back of the police car and you're getting booked in.
That actually reminds me. You know, you remember that case where that girl was getting trafficked and she actually killed her trafficker to get away?
Yes,
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, she should not be in prison. She should not be going through that. She is a straight victim, and you have someone trafficking you. I mean, if I was being trafficked and I had an opportunity, I mean.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, we've seen cases of these girls have full iron burn marks on their back. I'm talking like the full outline of an iron on their back with the little holes where the steam comes out and everything, and cigarette burns and cut marks. And it's sickening how they'll convince you to do what they want you to do. And, you know, they start out by, I mean, we had one girl in South Georgia. We found her. She was locked in a dog pen in the backyard. She had a dog bowl of water to drink out of. I mean, you would never, she could probably scream on the top of her lungs and nobody, and I mean nobody would ever be able to hear her. And she would get like 1 or 2 chicken nuggets a day or a piece of bread or whatever just to keep her barely alive. And then when it was time for her to perform, they would bring her in the house, shower her, she would perform, they would collect the money, and back to that dog pen you go. And the only reason we even knew about it is some hunters just happened to trespass on the property and see her back there. Had they have not, she would have probably been dead, because once they're done with you, they're done with you. It's like an old car. If the engine blows, what do? You bring it to the junkyard because it's worthless to you. The same thing with these girls. When they're done with them, they're not going to release them because they know too much information. So they're going to get rid of them. That's either shipping them overseas, and if they wind up in a third world country, good luck to you, or they're going to just kill them. And that's just a harsh reality of it. And I hate to put it that way, but people really need to realize that, you know, it's not a joke. It's not something that should be taken lightly at all. It shouldn't take a blind eye. And thankfully, now in 2020, it's exposed. Because I can tell you back in 2005, the word sex trafficking would get you in a lot of trouble. If you mention that word sex trafficking anywhere in Atlanta, you were in a lot of trouble because you were taking money out of the city of Atlanta. Because nobody wants to shop, nobody wants to bring their child to a movie, nobody wants to go to Georgia Dome, nobody wants to go to see a football game or a basketball game or a baseball game if they know children are being sold for money. So you expose that, money slows down. The pimps and everything else go to a different side of town. The good people that go want to spend their money go to a different side of town, so they lose revenue. So what are they going to do? They're going to shut it up. And they did that. They shut me up for a while, and they shut it up. But now it's all exposed. and now we have a governor that actually gives a crap in Georgia. Whereas before, I'm not going to say much on that. I'll wind up back somewhere I'm not supposed to be. But let's just say that before, exposing it was a crime in their eyes. So at least we're to the point now where people are aware about it, where it's, any TV show you watch, it's got human trafficking in it. I mean, there's a lot of them that have, missing kids, human trafficking. And a lot of people think, well, it's only in the movies. Well, wake up, because it's not only in the movies. I mean, it's everywhere around us. In some of the nicest areas and some of the slummiest areas. It's there.
Yep. And put it in perspective for you. Human trafficking also involves people you know. It could be your local doctor doing it. It could be your next door neighbor. That entire family is putting their children through trafficking. I believe we touched on a case last video. I'm not 100% sure, but where a little boy was being trafficked by his own dad. It really happens. There's sick people out there, and the justice system is still messed up to a point to where they're letting these people get away with it. And we're trying to fight it.
I think in Georgia, Chris, I think a big reason behind that, and I think we're going to see it this week, especially with our case in Warm Springs, which is not a trafficking case, but it's still a molestation case. It's a thing of the good old boy system.
Mm-hmm.
And, in some of the northern states, it's not as much, but down in the southern states, it's the good old boy system of who knows who.
Yeah.
And we're gonna let certain stuff slide because I know his daddy or I know his mama,
yeah,
or whatever the case may be, or they're good people. So they let a lot of stuff slide. And what that does at the end of the day, I mean, it hurts a lot of children because if these people know that they have that quote unquote immunity, they're gonna keep doing it. And it's about strength in numbers, and it's about, I think if people see something and they're not sure about it, hey, I'd rather people contact our tip line or contact y'all's tip line and make a report and say, hey, I was passing 123 Anytown Street, and hey, this looks like what's going on, or hey, I think my neighbor's got something going on because I see a lot of kids in and out of that house, different kids, different times, stay there a few days, or whatever the case may be. I always tell people I'd rather waste my time investigating something and it turns out to be nothing than not know about it. And then find out 6 months down the line, like happened in Pennsylvania, like a year or two ago, 6 years down the line, you find out that there was kids in the basement being held captive for how many years?
Yes.
So
yeah, absolutely.
Even if you think nothing's going on, and even if you made reports in the past to the police department, don't think if you make a report we're not going to look into it, or Chris and Scott aren't going to look into it, or Heather won't look into it. We're going to definitely look into it and see what we can find. Because the life you save, is possibly a child's life. And don't think that just because a child comes from a great home, has a lot of money and everything like that, it can't happen to them. Because it can happen to any child, anywhere, at any time.
Yes.
We just did that video with the school buses. I forgot how many school buses they said there was. But the video's on our page where I forget how many school buses full of children it is a year that are trafficked through the state of Georgia, just Georgia itself. It's horrendous. It's sickening. And just the amount of cases we intake every day are people reaching out. Every time I see a missing kid, the first thing that pops in my mind, I know it pops in Chris's and Scott's mind, is, are they being trafficked? That's the first thing that rolls through our mind as soon as we hear missing child. I mean, Heather will tell you that's the first thing that pops in our mind every single time we hear runaway or missing child. It's sex trafficking, and now we got this Wayfair thing going on. I know Chris has been looking into it, and we've been looking into it. I mean, that's a whole other subject.
Let me jump in right quick and steer the ship a little bit. We did announce that we were going to talk a little bit about borders.
Yes.
So, Paul, what is your thoughts on trafficking and smuggling humans across the southern border. Let's talk about Mexico for a second.
I never had too much with Mexico. I mean, I've had a few cases, maybe like 2 or 3, not with this organization, with the other one I had, where we actually worked a case or 2 or 3 that they were coming across from there. And it's the same textbook thing as every movie you see with that.
Well, they wind up everywhere. You know, they end up all over the place.
Of course they do. I mean, they come in through Texas, and by the time you know it, they're everywhere. From California all the way to New York.
Oh yes.
I've actually.
I mean, granted, obviously, you know, the human and sex trafficking happens everywhere, but according to the hotline, the most human trafficking cases have been reported in California, Texas, and Florida.
I'd actually like to touch on that. Let's talk about how that happens. It's actually a very common thing, and actually ICE intercepting quite a few cases. Let's say you live in Mexico. You're a poor family, you have a hard life, and you want nothing but the best for you and your family. So you're going to do anything in your power to make that happen. So what happens is they try and find someone that can get them to where they want to be.
Yep.
So turns out they can't afford it, but for maybe 1 or 2 people. So as a parent, what do? Like, well, I want the best for my children first, and maybe I can come later. So they hook them up with these people that take them across the border. However, what they don't realize is these people that are taking them across the border are actually traffickers. They are. And they have no good interest in your children or your family member or your loved ones whatsoever.
Yep. And that's the thing too that I've noticed, that when it comes to, you know, trafficking, you know, with these parents who think that they can, you know, send their children over to get a better life and everything else like that. Another thing that comes within the human trafficking is debt bondage. And, you know, so that way they say, oh, okay, you know, well, we got you over, you're going to do this to clear off your debt. And it just gets so far and far.
Oh, absolutely.
They don't realize that, hey, guess what? You're not getting out of this.
Yeah, here's exactly what happens. When the traffickers, let's say the traffickers get to the border and ICE intercepts it. So what happens is they're going to detain everybody in that group, whether they be adult, children, elderly, it doesn't matter. Now, what they're starting to do and they're starting to realize is they're doing DNA tests on these people. Now, these children that are with these adults, they are not their children. That is
Right.
their legal guardian. That is their trafficker. And here's what's going to happen. If they were to successfully get those children across the border, one of 2 things is going to happen. They're either going to, what Heather said, they're going to make them work off all that, and they're basically going to make it to where they earn basically nothing. So it takes their entire life to do it, even longer. You know, let's just say they're never going to be able to get out of that situation. They're into labor trafficking at that point. Or what happens is the trafficker wants to be over in the United States. So what they do is they abandon the child and totally forget. So now you have an innocent child who's wandering the streets, no family, nowhere to go. They're put in a situation where they have to start stealing. They get in trouble with the law. Then they get deported back to their country, and you know, all kinds of bad things. It's because and that's why they're being held. You know, do I agree necessarily with the way they're being held? No, but at the same time, you can't just let all these people run around, because a lot of these people are in fact involved in trafficking. And you know, and that's what needs to happen. More money needs to be pushed towards this situation so they can maybe make better facilities to hold people, or keep them safe from falling into the victimization of trafficking. It's really terrible, and sometimes even the person bringing them over the border might even kill them. I mean, they have no interest in your child. The child's well-being is not their interest. Getting what they want, and then once they get here, they start trafficking people in America, and maybe they'll abduct or kidnap somebody, and they'll put them into trafficking, drug them up, then ship them to other countries. That's how they end up in the Middle East, Europe. They end up south of the border, all over the place, in places where prostitution's actually legal.
I found some more border numbers for you here. This one's actually a little more recent. We got lucky. This one's only 2 years old. More than 30% of women are sexually assaulted on their journey on their way to the southern border. Nearly 70% of all migrants traveling north to the United States are victims of violence. 2018, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security made 1,588 human trafficking arrests and identified 308 victims. Of the 1,588 arrests, 1,543 were sex trafficking violations. That's just in 1 year.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, that with the southern border, with the human trafficking, numbers, only 10% of the cases.
Those are the only ones that got caught.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And that's why statistics are great. They put things in perspective. However, they're never really accurate because they don't have all the numbers. They don't have all the details. There is so much more information your mind can't even process it. It's disgusting. And because you're limited on all the information you get, and it's honestly, it's no one's fault because we can't see everything. They're doing their best, but what happens is they take the numbers from the information they do have, and when they put that in perspective to you, it kind of gives you an idea, well, hey, this is actually pretty serious, but in all reality, it's way more serious than what you're seeing. And it's happening here in the United States. Like I said, the people that are getting across, and this isn't just the southern border. This is coming from, the east is coming from up north. It's actually very common for them to come to from Europe, which is why airlines are starting to do more training in identifying victims of human trafficking, and they're setting up systems for those victims to say, hey, I need help, without actually saying it out loud. And which is great. And they're starting, actually doctors' offices, they're starting to get more involved, and they're starting to, I'm not going to say what those options they're putting out. They're actually really brilliant, but they have options where when you take a victim to a hospital and they're being trafficked, they have an option to where they can let the doctor know without actually telling them, and they're good to go. Now, there's a bunch of different systems out there, and I guess if you go to the hospital, you'll figure what those systems are out. You'll figure out what those systems are, but I mean, there's a lot of good things coming from it, but it's only the beginning. It's not enough because there's too much. Like there's a bunch of organizations out there trying to do whatever they can about human trafficking. However, to put it in perspective for you, trafficking is still getting worse, even with all the people who are trying to do something about it. So if it's getting worse, we need a lot more help. We need to hit them where it hurts. I mean, we got to do more.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's still going on, but I know back in the early 2000s, they would fly them in from California and New York and fly them into Hartsfield-Jackson Airport with a sponsor. The girl would get off the plane with her sponsor, would get into a vehicle, would sell that girl in Atlanta. That girl would finish up. You're talking $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 for a 13, 12, 10-year-old. Put that girl back on the plane with her sponsor, and she would be back in her originating state that night or that next morning. It wouldn't even be 24 hours. So people would buy online a child. They would fly that child in. That person would have sex with that child. Then they would put that child back on a plane with that sponsor and bring them back to that originating state, all within a 24-hour period. And doing that, it was so hard to track people because they're there and they're gone. So you're looking like, say, in Georgia for somebody. Well, they're not in Georgia anymore. And, Homeland Security has really stepped it up since then. And like you say, there's so many systems in place now. But, back in the day, it was nothing to put a child on a plane and let them fly. You know,
Right.
nobody really checked anything like they do now. I mean, now Homeland Security's, on their game with it, and there's so much awareness of human trafficking. But, Scott and Chris are talking about coming, south of the border back over here. And Scott could tell you that, him and I were in Atlanta, I don't know, what was it, 2-3 months ago, Scott, where we were trying to rescue that girl that's being sex trafficked. And
about 3 months.
she was being sex trafficked by the cartel. I'm not going to lie to you. I was nervous as heck because our organization is not big enough to handle the cartel. I mean, these people will behead you in a second. But we still went out there and tried to see what was going on. And unfortunately, the girl got nervous and she didn't do it. But it was amazing when we started digging into the background of the house and who it was owned by. Winds up leading into a corporation and a bigger corporation and a bigger corporation and a huge real estate firm that
Led all the way back to Texas.
thousands of houses all over the United States, and they're all rental homes. And I'm not talking 1 or 10. I mean, Scott would say we're talking thousands of rental properties. And I mean, what are you going to do? You can't go knock on thousands of doors. But that's right. It led right back to Texas. And the only reason we realized that was from tracing the cell phone number back. And, that cell phone number led to another cell phone number. And by the time we get a few hundred numbers down, we realized that, wow, this all leads to a huge corporation that's in real estate. And they just have all these rental houses. So what do you think they do with these rental houses? Well, they're holding these kids captive at these rental houses, and they're prostituting them out of it. People, may think, well, that'd be a lot of money to hold all that stuff, all those properties. But at the end of the day, the amount of money they're making off these children is more than sufficing the amount that house costs. But the amount of money they're getting for each girl and for each trick that girl's got to turn, because don't think they're just selling once a night. Some of these girls are having 10, 15, 20, 30 clients at night. And if you just put that at a low rate of $10,000 a piece, that's $200,000 in one night off of one girl.
Right.
They don't care if that girl's ripped apart. They don't care if she's bleeding from every orifice of her body. They don't care if she's beat to hell and she'll die that night. They can care less about that. They care about that $200,000 that girl just brought in. And if that house gets hot, what do? We clean out that house. We put the sign up front that says for rent, and nobody's the wiser. Somebody goes and rents the house. We move on to another one. And it all comes back to the cartel, which originates out of Mexico. It's a scary situation, and that's the kind of money that's involved in it. It's like I said, it's not – I mean, you've got your small guys. I mean, we've caught a few of the small ones, in Joel Maverick games in Clayton County. He was sex trafficking. He was small time. But, then again, he was still doing it, and he's in jail now.
He was talking like he was big, though.
Yes, he was.
He definitely talked like he was big. When he stopped that? He stopped talking like that when them U.S. Marshals took a piece of his ass and his pride.
Exactly.
He definitely stopped talking that game. But it still doesn't make it right for what he was doing. But he was doing it to satisfy his own personal gain of smoking drugs. So he was selling those girls cheap, maybe $30, $40 a piece, so he could get high.
Yep.
But he's still
he was abusing them himself.
Well, yeah, we know that, and sending videos to his own family.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's some sick people out there, man.
It goes a lot higher than that, and that's the whole thing of a lot, and I don't understand it a lot of times. I get annoyed about it because it happens right in my neighborhood of, the guy that's selling a little dime bag of weed, then the police aren't doing nothing about it, and they say because getting him off the street does nothing, because he might be selling that, but we arrest him and they just go sell to somebody else that's selling those little dime bags of weed. The sex trafficking thing, I mean, I've heard that before with that too. He's not the big fish. And you're right, like Joel Maverick games wasn't the big fish in this whole thing. They made a lot of arrests in that case. Did we get the big fish? No. But they're so onto it, and you got to watch who you talk to about it, whether it be a private citizen or law enforcement, because you don't know who's in the mix of this money. Because if you don't think they have the money to pay people off, they definitely have the money to pay people off.
Yep.
And it's just, your little fish over there, as they call it, may stream right to the big person.
Right.
So it's everywhere. It's big money involved in it. It's sickening, and it's everywhere. There's so many websites, and I'm not going to name them, but there's so many websites that you can go to.
Actually, yes, we have a list of the most up-to-date sites that are used for human trafficking, and yeah, we're not going to put those out for the public, but I just want to if there's any traffickers on here watching, you're being watched. I mean, there's no way around it. Like, you're already screwed. It's just a matter of time. We have a list of all of these websites, and you can sit there and make new ones, but we're constantly getting tips, and people are constantly sending things like, hey, check this out, check that out, and we're paying attention. And there's something we're actually going to start looking into here soon, that caught our attention recently with a very popular site that people go to. We're definitely going to tear that apart, and it's just a different way of trafficking people. It's disgusting, and it's, again, people, companies, professions you think you can trust, but you can't.
Well, yeah, it's not, like I said before, Chris, it's not your average guy where everybody thought for the movies back in the 1980s. I mean, you're talking congressmen, lawyers, judges, CEOs, people running banks. I mean, it's amazing how far this goes and the amount of money involved in it.
No, look at Epstein.
I mean, look at that. Yeah.
If you can whack a guy in a federal prison, you got some pull, Hillary.
My ex-wife actually has a lot of dirt on
again?
Hillary Clinton. My ex-wife has a lot of dirt on Hillary Clinton, and if Hillary wants to call me, I'll give her her name and phone number and address. Lots of information that could bury the whole Clinton family. Yes.
But
anyway.
Hey, well, let's go ahead
right,
and talk about human trafficking within our borders, because it's also a big deal. And we kind of touched on this last video when we discussed runaways, children, youth of any age, people who are trying to run away from home when they're not ready to be exposed to the big world yet. So what's going on is these traffickers are paying attention to your social medias, especially to the ones who are using social media as a diary, which you shouldn't be doing, but to each his own. And they're paying attention to everything you do. And as soon as you post something like, oh, I can't take this anymore, I'm going to run away, or I'm gone, I'm out, something like that, and whatever lingo you use, they're going to watch that, and then they're going to reach out and entice you and say, hey, I have an opportunity for you to have a better life. Well, it sounds great what they're pitching until you actually get into it. And actually, we're going to have another video in the near future. It's going to talk about how there are certain fake and real businesses that are used to pull people in and coerce them into trafficking without them really knowing. And so let me put this in perspective for you. So you have a child whose dream is to be the next pop star or the next rapper, and their parents are constantly like hitting on their dream, like, hey, you're never gonna be successful in this, you need to be more realistic, and they're just crushing them. So they get tired of it and they run away. Well, people are paying attention to their social media. That trafficker reaches out, and the trafficker happens to own a music studio. So the trafficker's like, hey, if you come over to my studio, and I see this happen a lot with women who want to become artists too, come over to the studio. I have a little space you can stay at. You can record your music, and we'll start putting your music out there to the public and make you famous. Well, it sounds great. And then what happens, and they do stuff like, well, hey, let me get all your information. Let me get your ID or passport. We're going to make a copy of it just in case we need to travel and go overseas and, maybe do concerts. So when they take that stuff from you, they don't give it back. So you no longer have any identification. Then they find a way to like drug you up, and they basically say, hey, you're stuck here, you're not going anywhere, you're mine until you pay me off for this, this, and this, or they just keep you and they coerce you into this life and you're stuck into it. And before you know it, once they get you to be obedient to a point to where they know they can control you completely, they're probably gonna maybe sell you, send you overseas. And there's a lot of different ways to get people in and out of the country without people really knowing, and it happens on a day-to-day basis. And it's smuggling. And there is a difference between human trafficking and human smuggling, and people don't understand that the difference in that definition as well, but it still ties together. So what happens is they're put in a position, and these local traffickers are like, hey, I'm going to sell this person for this much money, and then they find a way to bring them out of the country, and before you know it, they're somewhere in Europe, they're somewhere in the Middle East, they're somewhere in Mexico, Canada, where they're never going to be heard from again. They may even be killed. I mean, there's no telling what's going to happen to that person once they get to another location. We already talked about the different things traffickers do. They use them for sex, labor, organ harvesting, drug, everything. It doesn't matter what it is. They're being used for that purpose, for that person's personal gain and finances. It's disgusting. So within our borders, it's not always people who are already from the United States, even though a majority of them are from here. But there's also a lot of people who are already in the United States from other countries that are participating in this, that are taking our children, our elderly. Elderly abuse is a thing. They sex traffic the elder.
Yes.
It's disgusting. So I'm not saying don't take your grandparents or your mom and dad to a retirement home, but definitely do some research behind it before you do. See what people are saying about it, because there's some places out there, sadly, that abuse your loved ones,
Yes.
and they're too terrified to tell you anything about it. And it's sad, but it's the harsh reality. And I don't mean to make this to like, oh, you're scared to make a move on anything, but you should be. You should be scared to make a move, because you can't trust anybody these days. It's people from your judges all the way down to your regular house painter or something. They're trafficking somebody. It's doctors even, and it makes it hard to really trust the people you think you're supposed to trust and get the things done that you need to get done.
We know all about those dirty judges, don't we?
Say again?
We know all about those dirty judges, don't we?
Oh, yeah. I mean, without giving too much details, you want to talk about that one?
No, not right now. Since all that's not over with, so.
Okay, fair enough. Well, anyways, during cases, sometimes we find out that judges are not what they seem to be as well. And those judges are being...
They're paid under the table.
Yep.
Yep.
It's sad. It needs to be fixed. Is it all judges? No, it's not. But it happens more than it should. One is too many times.
Absolutely.
But going back to that now, we talked a little bit about outside of our country. So knowing that trafficking originates within the United States and also originates outside of the United States and is constantly going in and out of the borders, let's talk about how they're coming in and out of our borders. And it's actually, they're getting clever. They're doing a lot of different things. From, Mexico, they have tunnels under the ground. And they're bringing people through tunnels. They have trucks that come through where maybe it looks like a regular truck, but under the flatbed, there's people who are laying there. They have different ways to hide people. They cross, deserts. They do whatever they can, maybe even by air, if they stay low enough. Um, the,
Train.
yeah, trains. Thank you, trains. There's a plethora of different ways. They
Apparently, that's pretty big in
right,
Pakistan, India, all that
and
area. The train travel.
the
Yep.
outside of the United States coming in, like from the sea, they do it by ships, barges. They have all those connexes on the barges that are being shipped over. They have people in those connexes, semi trucks. They have submarines, submersibles that bring them over. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, people really don't." Yeah, they really do that. They're getting creative. And when one thing is when a barrier is put up, people adapt and overcome and find another way to do it. And you know, it sucks, but people need to be more aware, and that comes down to there's two different types of people. You have the civilians and you have protectors, and civilians and protectors have two different mentalities. You have civilians who have the see something, say something mentality, which is fine, but then you also have the civilian who has the see something and record mentality, which not always the best way to go. But see something, say something is great, um, as long as you're saying something to the people who can do something about it. Now, protectors have the mentality see something, do something. That means that a protector knows they can do something to solve that situation, and they they do something about it properly. Now, um, seeing something and doing something doesn't necessarily mean you're getting hands-on and you're handling everything yourself. And I tell my investigators a lot, where a lot of my investigators are really trained. They know what they're doing. However, I tell them, hey, don't try and handle it yourself. Do it correctly. Get the evidence. Submit it to who needs to have it. And sometimes doing something is still telling the right people that need to know about it. But but at the same time, you're standing by just in case something life-threatening has happened. You can intervene and take care of it accordingly, um, hopefully without anybody getting hurt. Um, and that's the different mentality people have, and that's actually something that needs to change within the United States, because when people have the see something, say something mentality, there's too many people who are saying something when there's a lot of capable people who are able to do something about it and actually intervene. Um, and it, how to tell what type of person you are, you'll just know it. If you're like, oh, that's a scary situation, I don't want to get involved, I'm afraid that this and this and this is going to happen, then you're the type of person, hey, instead of just sitting there and watching it happen, call someone and say, hey, I see this happening right now. What do I need to do? And that also involves educating yourself and knowing who to call. You need to call the right people, because sometimes calling 911, they might not be able to get there fast enough. Maybe you have other organizations that can come out there, like let's say you're a civilian, you call Bikers Against Abuse, and they come out there and are like, hey, we'll come out there right now. They'll jump on the ball, and they'll actually call law enforcement or people they have connections with. They're like, hey, this is going on right now. I need you to stop it, because like this is serious. Can you come out here right now? And most likely, law enforcement will comply and come out immediately to handle the situation and hopefully de-escalate it. But one of the issues is there's too many people. There's more people who are in the see something, say something mentality, and about 1% of people in the U.S. are see something, do something.
Yeah.
And if that could change, maybe a lot more cases of human trafficking would go away, because people know what to look for. They know what to report. They know who to report it to. And all that's very important. Does anybody have anything they want to elaborate on?
I mean, like if that case for Anaya Blanchard, that was our case in Alabama, that just goes exactly to what you said of, a husband and wife watched Anaya Blanchard get stuffed into a trunk of a car, and they watched that car leave. And the husband was going to call 911, but he listened to his wife, who said, "Hey, that's not our business. Don't get involved. Let's go back to our motel room." Well, that cost that young college student her life. I mean, the husband didn't have to be a hero and go and take the matters in his own hands. But the least they could have done was call 911, give him the tag number, say, "Hey, there was just an abduction. A girl just got stuffed into a trunk of a car by a guy at gunpoint at a gas station." And, it would have been a good possibility that it would have come out over the radio as an abduction, and she would have still been alive. So nobody's saying that guy had to run over there and be a hero, because Paul tried that one time, going out by himself being a hero, and I wound up with a bullet in my back. By the luck and miracle of God, I'm still alive. I thought I'd never walk again from it. But, we rescued a girl, and her pimp showed up, and I told him, "Don't worry, I'm coming back for your ass." Well, guess what? Playing hero didn't work out too well that day for me. So nobody's saying play hero, because it could get you killed. But people were also not saying don't take a back seat to it. Because had that guy just dialed 911 and not listened to his wife, there's a good possibility Anaya Blanchard would be alive today. Now, most people would have either held that guy at gunpoint or reacted to it in some way, shape, or form, followed the vehicle or whatever, but the least that person should have done was dial 911. And you know what? Even if it's not something like that, where you just have that feeling, I mean, as humans, we have that instinct. When something's not right, we can feel it. I mean, I grew up in New York. I remember walking down alleys many a times at nighttime feeling, man, something just ain't right down this alley. And, hauling ass down the alley to find out that they're robbing people in the beginning of the alley. Thankfully, I had that instinct. But, so we have that human instinct. So if something doesn't feel right, more than likely it's not right. Something is wrong, So, and like Chris and I and Scott, I think we can all agree, I'd rather have somebody call and say, "Hey, I think this is what's going on at this place or with this person," and we investigate it, than nobody says a dang thing, and we wind up finding out 6 months down the line that something went on, and then the people come forward, and we have that all the time, was with our tip hotline of, after we catch the person, "Oh, back 5 years ago, I knew something just wasn't right with him." But you didn't tell nobody. That's the issue.
That's all it takes. That is the problem.
I mean, we got a dogfighting rink right now that we thought was just a dogfighting rink. And Scott will tell you, and I know Heather's in it and Chris, we thought it was just a dogfighting rink. Who knew? 3 hours later, we'd find out it's a sex trafficking rink on top of the dogfighting rink. Just because one person who's in this chat decided to tag me in something, and, within a few hours, we're finding out that he's sex trafficking an amazing amount of kids and adult women with these dogs. And that's the perfect cover-up, is having a bunch of dogs that are vicious outside your home, because who's really going to go look? Because the police ain't going to want to go on that property with all these pit bulls hanging around your yard.
Yep.
They're having sex parties. They're advertising sex parties on Facebook. That's how blunt they are about this stuff, because they feel invincible to it, like nobody's watching. I mean, we're watching. It's coming down this week. I'm just a little pissed off that Peter never called me back yet.
I think we should go ahead and touch on this. Now, before we talk about this, I wanna make this very clear. We're not accusing this company of doing this until we actually know all the facts. But I want to say the example of what we're seeing is very closely related to how human trafficking happens and how these children, adults, the elderly are transported or sold. And I'm sure a lot of people see it on social media right now, Wayfair. Now, again, I'm not accusing Wayfair of anything, okay? I want to get that clear, because I don't have enough evidence to say, hey, this is actually going on. It could be something completely different, and until I have the evidence that completely confirms, hey, this is actually happening, then I'm not going to say that, and I definitely don't feel like getting sued. So what happens, you see a lot of examples like that. Wayfair has wall lockers, foot lockers or something on their website.
Yeah.
And they're simple. You probably get one for maybe $200 or less in reality. Well, what they're doing is instead of just calling it a wall locker and describing the color or what it's made of, they have a name in front of it. Well, the name is of a missing person. And by coincidentally, there's like multiple different ones that look the same that have different names. It looks like it'd be made the same way, same company. So why would it have a different name? So each of these names tie into a missing person. And what makes it even weirder is that these wall lockers are ranging from, $1,000 to $9,000.
I found a $12,000 one before.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for a wall locker to cost that much unless it's a transformer and opens up into a house. Then it shouldn't cost that much.
Right.
It's really suspicious, and that's the type of stuff that traffickers use to push their product. And when I say product, I mean people. And I can't harp on this enough. I hear a lot of people say, hey, slavery doesn't exist anymore. It actually does. It's just trafficking. It's modern day slavery. And it's in different forms. It's still alive and well. And, being able to identify something suspicious, say, hey, this isn't right, instead of saying, hey, I have a gut feeling that something's going on here, and keeping it to yourself, say, I got to tell somebody about this. And a majority of the time, people get tips. This hasn't happened with us yet, but people get tips all the time in law enforcement, and they tend not to take it seriously because it sounds too far-fetched. But that person took the step necessary to report it. And then later down the road, when something actually comes of it, those people are kicking themselves because they didn't listen to the tip that was given to them. So it's actually good to be diligent and actually look into something, no matter how far-fetched it sounds or crazy it may be. Looking into it is not going to hurt.
Yeah, like Meriwether County.
Anybody.
Like if Meriwether County DFACS were listening to a tip 20 years ago about our Meriwether County case, he wanted to just rape the little girl.
Yeah.
But they pushed it under the rug because they thought the tip was this guy is a great person in the community. He would never do something like that. So he kind of pushed that tip under. And, thankfully now the sheriff's office is actually doing something. But how many kids has this guy hurt? And it's not a sex trafficking case, but it's a molestation case. So how many kids has this guy hurt over the years because the system failed? But even if the system failed you and you gave a tip to somebody and the system failed you, don't not contact Chris or Scott or myself or Heather or anybody in these organizations and give the tip again. Because anybody in both of these organizations will tell you that we don't take any tip lightly. I don't care. You could tell me the strangest thing, like
an alien.
Marvin the Martian came down and spanked a little girl in her behind, and we go and look for Marvin the Martian.
Absolutely.
I mean, so just because you gave a tip and it was unfounded or they didn't believe it or it fell through the cracks or whatever else, I mean, give it again. Because it just might not have got to the right person, or the person that got to has their hands in the game. I remember that too, because there's a lot of people with a lot of influential people, a lot of influential money, and you're not talking somebody hands somebody $100 to keep shit undercover. You're talking 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, depending on what it is. And you gotta remember, to these big organizations like the cartel and the Russian mafia and all these other ones, $300,000, $500,000 is a drop in the bucket. They're making that one night on two girls. And like you're saying, human trafficking, as far as smuggling them, I mean, your major ports around the United States, Port of Savannah, the ports in New Jersey,
Any major airport where traffic
Yeah,
comes in
every
from other
time you see a truck go by with a sea container on it, the first thing I think is, I wonder if there's a girl in that, or it just happens as much to boys as it does girls. But I wonder if there's a child in one of those sea containers going overseas.
Yeah.
That's what I always think, because you know, if you figure, I worked for a logistics company. I worked for a company that used to get containers from overseas, and they would store them at a U.S. Customs yard in Atlanta, and then they would ship back out to wherever their final destination was. And, you know, they didn't check every single container that came from overseas. It's hit or miss that they check it. Some of the containers they check, I mean, have millions and millions of dollars in them. Some of the containers they check, you know, have nothing in them. Some have drugs galore. Some have children in them. It's a matter of, I mean, you know, hundreds of thousands of containers come out of that port every day. It is physically impossible to check each and every single container. And don't think for a minute that there aren't people being trafficked in. They might not even be children. I mean, it could be whatever. And the same thing exporting. What goes out of this country is the same thing. They get tired of them here, throw them in a shipping container inside of a wooden box, and ship them over, and they wind up in Russia, or they wind up in India, or Pakistan, or Saudi Arabia. Once they're over there, good luck. You're not going to get them back. It's a third world country. Good luck.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of people, I mean, if you look at Runaway Train with NCMEC, wow, Runaway Train is huge. Where have all these kids gone? Because they're not all dead. So where are they? Some of them in their 20s and 30s now. Probably in some third world country, you know, yeah, being sex trafficked or had 35 kids with some sheik. I mean, who knows? I mean, you know, there's no way to know. But not all of them on Runaway Train are dead. They're somewhere. Savannah Puccio was my huge case back in the day. She was missing for, God, I want to say 10 or something years. And found her in California just because a flyer went up at a gas station. The gas station connected to a hotel, and somebody recognized that her digitized photo of what she would look like now looked like this girl. And they called law enforcement. Law enforcement went out there. This girl had no idea who she was, no idea what her name was, no idea where she came from. I mean, it was a huge upsetting case, but it was MS-13 had trafficked her for years and years, and everybody assumed that she was dead. She wasn't dead. She was actually maybe 40 miles away from where she was abducted from. That's crazy. For all those years, nobody even knew that she was there. That's how confined they had this girl, where she couldn't go in the public, where she couldn't really do much. And all those years, you know, 10 or something years, and then one day she's found.
Right.
And everybody just assumed she was dead, but she wasn't dead. She was alive and well now. Was she drugged up? Oh, absolutely. She don't remember nothing. She probably had the mentality of a 10-year-old by the time she was done. But, so she fit their plan as far as doing what they wanted, so they kept her alive and they made money off of her. Look at how many millions of dollars they made off this girl for 10 years.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that, you know, that police officer reacted when they got the tip. He went, he did a little surveillance, he seen her, he grabbed her, he fingerprinted her on the fingerprint machine, and bam, it's her. Who would think?
Yeah.
I mean, who would ever think, you know, that 10 years later, you know, I don't know what mom must have thought when she got the phone call. I have no idea what she must have thought. I know she was in tears with me on the phone for a few hours. She couldn't believe it was real. I mean, in her mind, it wasn't real. This cannot be my daughter. It was her daughter. So that's how long they'll keep these people. It's not like a short-lived thing where they're going to sex traffic them for maybe 6 months, a year, and let them go, or whatever the case may be. If they're doing what they want them to do, they're going to keep them as long as they're making them money. It's like a car. If a car keeps running for you and it gives you no problem, you're going to keep it as long as you can. But when it starts giving you problems and costing you money and costing you havoc and stress, you get rid of it. It's the same mentality they have, and it's unfortunate.
And it really is. There was this one sex trafficking case that I had with my prior organization where this guy, he thought he was, you know, going to be meeting up with a 14-year-old boy. And he was saying, you know, that he was a construction worker, he was a painter, all sorts of things. And his plan was, I mean, obviously, of course, he didn't know that he was talking to a decoy, but his plan was to get the boy and take him back to one of the construction sites that he works at because it was abandoned, you know, at night. But yeah, and then he was talking to, you know, what he thought was the boy of, you know, hey, you know, if you're having any life problems, I can take you out of it, you know, I'll help you, you know, and had it in plans to take him to the abandoned construction site.
I mean,
Who knows what would have happened there?
Right.
There's a lot of signs for this too, and identifying a victim of human trafficking is very important, which a lot of people don't know how to do. And actually, Heather sent me something recently with a substantial list of things, and I appreciate that. But there's a lot more to it. There's ways to tell how someone's being controlled. If someone's in a situation where being trafficked, whether it be coming into the country or going out of the country, you'd be able to tell, hey, there's something not right here. They could be with somebody that's really controlling, holding on to them firmly. The person they're with, or the person that's with them, is not happy at all. You know, they're you know, maybe looking down. They're ashamed to be seen. They're maybe wearing long sleeves in hot weather. You know, the person that has them is disrespectful, being firm, aggressive with them. These people can be, you know, constantly running away. It could be homeless children that you see. You know, simple things like tattoos. A lot of tattoos and markings, brandings that say, hey, you know, this person belongs to this organization, this gang, or mafia. And there's, like, let's say they're restricted, they can't go anywhere. Like you say, hey, you know, you interact with this person, they're always terrified, they're kind of introvert, and they're like really held back, don't really say too much, and they say, you know, I can't do this, but they're like, what, 21 years old? Why couldn't you do whatever you want, you know? And they're constantly saying, I can't do this, I can't do that. They're always shut off. It's like, hey, something's not right here. You got to be able to identify those issues, and actually, let me pull up this list. I can go over this list she sent me on how to identify suspicious activity. Chronic runaway or homeless youth, have goods or services they can't afford, excessive amounts of cash, carries multiple hotel keys, signs of branding, tattoos, jewelry, restricted and or scripted communication. You'll be able to tell if it's scripted. It sounds outside the norm, maybe not the way a person would normally talk. Physical injury, signs of abuse, and that also ties into maybe if they're trying to hide that abuse, they'll have like long sleeves on during the summer, so maybe watch out for that. Lying about age, false identification, or inconsistencies. I can't speak. Appear to be scarred, nervous, may not make eye contact, always like holding their head down like we discussed. Lack of knowledge about where they are or why they are there. Signs of psychological trauma and abuse, anxiety, depression, thoughts of suicide, panic, or lack of emotion, so a flat affect. Typically has someone with them at all times. This person may seem controlling. And I just discussed all that, well, most of it. Those are ways you can tell, hey, there's something not right here. And if you see that, again, it goes back to see something, say something, and see something, do something.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
We got a good question from Sharon Meeks. She says, does it happen at grocery stores or mall parking lots?
Yes, actually.
What do you look for when walking to your vehicle?
Okay, that's actually a really good question. There's actually some bold people who have been recently walking around grocery stores, and they'll go up to parents and they'll literally ask them, how much do you want to sell your kid for? They literally do that. There's no limit to it. And as far as being able to tell, um, well, obviously when someone comes up to you and says that, or there's someone who's like kind of being suspicious and watching you, and they kind of happen to be in the same place you are all the time, and they just like keep looking away or something. One of two things: they either think you're hot, or they're, they're looking at you like you're their next victim. Another thing, a lot of people don't understand this. They're not really observant, but in grocery store parking lots, hotel parking lots, or any parking lot for that matter, someone who's looking for a victim is not necessarily gonna be out in the open. They may very well be in their vehicle in the back of the parking lot watching people from a distance. So if you see people chilling in their car, doesn't mean they're getting ready to traffic somebody. No. Does it mean you should pay attention and be aware if they try anything? Absolutely. And that all goes into situational awareness, and that's a whole nother thing. I can touch hours on that.
It could be a private investigator working too. So
Yeah, it actually could. So just be careful, and private investigators, to mitigate any problems, we actually call law enforcement and let them know we're doing a case in an area. We don't necessarily tell them what the case is, but we tell them, hey, we're doing surveillance and we'll be in this location. That way they know that we're there. But that's how we kind of mitigate that, so they know, hey, well, we got a call about this. Okay, it's nothing. We're all good to go. But if someone's getting ready to snatch up a victim, they're going to be pretty suspicious. They're going to be off in the distance, or they're going to be ballsy and they're going to come up to you and say, hey, how much you want for your kid? It's stressful. You don't want to deal with it anymore. They throw out large sums of money and say, hey, I can give you this much, and it looks enticing to the parents, and believe it or not, some actually go for it. It's pretty disgusting.
Or let alone try to track
being followed. Let me tell you something. If you feel like you're being followed, the first thing you need to do is, when it's safe, and if you can do it hands-free, well, if you're in danger, screw all that. You might want to get pulled over. So if you feel like you're in danger of being followed, what you want to do is you want to call 911 right away. Say, hey, I'm not sure, but I feel like I'm being followed. And then tell them, I'm going to come drive in front of the police station.
Yes,
the sheriff's office. And if that person follows you to that location, and they're still there, stay on the phone with them. And then when you pass by, they can intervene and pull that person over. That's the best thing you can do. Do not, under any circumstances, stop. Don't do it. And let's talk about local abductions. When you're at the gas station, I see this happen to a lot of people. Yes, it involves a lot of theft too, but if they got someone in that car, they're going to take that person too. They don't care. So when you're filling up your gas tank, I don't care if you're standing right next to your car, lock your damn car.
Absolutely.
Lock it, plain and simple. If you have someone in the car, maybe get them out to stand with you, and that way they can maybe watch your back. That way they're not in a car that's turned off and it's really hot. But do not leave your car unlocked, because what some people will do is they'll get really low to the ground, open your doors, maybe get in your car and drive off with it. If your kids are in there, your kids are gone until someone is able to get a hold of them. They're in danger the whole time they're with that person. Or they're just going to steal things out of your vehicle when you're not looking. But that's a very, very easy way to get abducted. People.
That's very common.
Yeah, and look, a lot of people carry pepper spray, tasers, stuff like that. But let me tell you something. I bet you don't know how to use them. I bet you don't rehearse and train yourself to grab these things or see how accessible they actually are to you when you're in a situation, because traffickers can run up on you and snatch you before you can even think about grabbing whatever you have to protect yourself. And that's a problem. So people have these items, they have pepper spray, and then they're like, oh crap, it's in the bottom of my purse somewhere, or oh man, it's somewhere in my pocket, oh crap, I left it in my car. It doesn't do you any good. So you need to make sure if you're getting something to protect yourself, I know as simple as it may seem to use it, you need to train. You do, because there's no point on having it at that case, because I guarantee you I can throw a whole bunch of scenarios at you where if I come at you, you won't be able to get to that item fast enough.
That's a great idea, Chris. I feel like we should do some more training. You want to get together tomorrow and do some shooting drills?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And that's the thing too, you know, when women, it happens to everyone, you know, men and women, and, you know, younger teenagers, you know, when they get their license and they're going to the store, it's very important that when you get in your car, lock your car and just leave. Don't sit there, don't count money, you know, because people who are watching in the parking lots, they pay attention for people who are not paying attention to their surroundings.
So real quick, I'm sure people see me kind of trying not to laugh. It's not because I'm being insensitive. It's because there's an inside joke between us, and they're making fun of me right now. So you know, that's why we're not laughing at the information being put out, just to make sure we're not, you know, being perceived as insensitive. But yeah, well played, guys. Well played.
I didn't say nothing.
Oh,
Thank you.
Yeah, well, you
I just
actually.
laughed.
Yeah, I know. You're still part of the problem. But all right. So touching on what we just talked about, you really got to find a way to not just have something to protect yourself, but learn how to use what you have to protect yourself.
And
Pepper
typically,
spray,
you know,
Nerf guns, whatever you got.
Yeah.
Nerf guns. Also, iPhones and Samsung. I know there's a bunch of different ones, but every phone has an emergency alert system on it. Learn it. Learn your phone.
And your watches.
Yeah, every phone has an emergency alert system on it, whether it's the power button and the volume up button, or it's the power button and the volume down button, or it's the volume up and volume down at the same time, or it's a home screen. But every one of them has an emergency alert system on it. It's a panic mode. Just you have to learn your phone, because Paul's not going to go through all the different phone things. But everybody's interested in all the apps on their phone, but that emergency alert system on your phone can and will save your life if it's ever needed.
Oh yeah.
And the other thing, you know, a lot of people, and I've brought this up for years now, there's a gentleman named Stanley Tart, and he's out of Fayetteville, Georgia. He's an elderly male. But he actually developed E911. Back in the day, it was Entrada, then it changed to Positron, then it turned to E911. And I've had the honor of sitting down and eating dinner with this man, and he developed what's called Text 911. And Text 911 is you dial 911 on your text, and you send him a text message. So if you're in any kind of trouble where you can't talk, you can just type in help, and it'll automatically put your settings on, and it'll lock your phone location in and track your phone, and they can come. And also, I mean, we use it mostly for domestic violence situations of saying you can dial 911 and say, hey, I like to order a pizza. And that 911 operator is already trained to know when you call 911 and ask for a pizza, something's wrong. So they're going to track your location and come. So, and that's, like I said, that's mostly domestic violence, because if you're being abducted with sex trafficking or something like that, you're probably not going to have the opportunity to call. But if you do have the opportunity, like you're running away from somebody or whatever, or walking away and somebody's following you, and you don't think it's safe to get on your phone, you can always text 911 help, and they'll track your phone to where you are. And that's, I believe it's in every single state in the United States now. So it's text 911. So you just type in 911, where you'd put the person's phone number or contact in, and just write help or whatever. If you can get out what's going on, you do it. If you can't, help is sufficient, and press the send button. And that was, like I said, developed by him. The same person that developed where they can trace where your phone is. Now, of course, if you've got one of these throwaway phones, these little things you get at Dollar General that are by some bebop company over there, I can't tell you how accurate it's going to work because they're burner phones and they're meant as burner phones and they suck. But if you're on with any kind of carrier like Verizon or AT&T or whoever else, Sprint, which doesn't work for crap. But if you're on it with any known companies out there, and Metro's the same thing. They can track and take your phone, and that could possibly save your life. So learn your phones, because you may need that little thing on your phone if something goes awry. Instead of the person grabbing your phone and tossing it on you, you have nothing to call from. At least they have a starting point where you were, if that does happen. But they're going to toss you in the trunk or throw you in the back seat and give you some chloroform or hop you up on G or heroin or whatever. Next thing you know, you're 3 cities up in a room, locked in a room with no clothes on and being pimped out. So it's common. And, it's boys and girls, men and women. I don't think it don't happen to adult men, too, because it does. We've had a few cases in Atlanta, adult men. You'd never think, looking at the size of this guy, that he could have possibly been abducted. But he was. Wound up in, where did he wind up? I think in Mississippi. And he was being sex trafficked. Adult man, big guy, probably like 215, 220, 5'10". Who the hell would ever think? Well, he was. Wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, it's pretty substantial. There's a lot that goes on to it. And one of the really touchy subjects that people don't think about too is when the victim of human trafficking is found. And when I say victim, a lot of people don't know this, but sometimes recruiters for traffickers are victims as well. Sometimes even the trafficker may be a victim. They just put in a place where they have to do what they're told, or maybe their family gets killed. There's no telling. So you always want to have that mentality that, hey, maybe, yes, they're doing the wrong thing, and yes, it's disgusting, but you also have to keep in the back of your mind, could this person be a victim?
Yeah, we've run into that a few times where somebody's been turned into a recruiter.
Yep, it's disgusting. And when I looked at this person's face in particular and said, hey, this is your opportunity to tell me right now, if you need help, we will protect you and we will protect your family. There is not one thing that these people can do to you. And she then said the hardest thing I've ever had to hear: no, I'm good. And it's because she was terrified. You could tell she wanted to say yes, but she said no.
Well, that was like our girl in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
That was the same thing like our girl in Atlanta, Chris, the one that said that there was even a 6-month-old baby in that house, and they were already sex trafficking a 6-month-old baby. And she wanted out. I mean, Scott and I sat there. What did we sit there? 6 hours, Scott?
Yeah,
waiting
something
for
like
this
that.
girl to show up.
Pretty late.
And she never showed up. She got so scared she didn't show up. We've never heard from her again. And that was going back to our case that originated out of Texas. But, they get so scared. They want out. They know that they're going to die there. And she wanted to protect that little baby is the reason she wanted out. But she got so scared that she didn't do it. And, we held off APD coming in because we thought she was going to run. And a lot of people don't realize, too, is the technology is so great these days. This girl had a QR code tattooed to her face. And these people that know about this actually will walk down the road and they will scan that QR code with their phone. And when they scan that QR code on that person's face with their phone, it brings them to the exact website of where that girl's for sale. And they make that phone call, they pay the money, and that girl meets them wherever. So that's how technology has come into this negatively. Because that was the first time we heard about it that night. I was blown away that somebody would actually tattoo a QR code.
Let's touch on that real quick. I'm going to call some people, well, not individuals, but I want to call a group of people out, tattoo artists. If you're a tattoo artist and you know damn well that there are certain tattoos that are used for certain things, and you are helping them by tattooing these barcodes or whatever the case is, the markings that these traffickers put on their victims, you are part of the problem.
Yes.
If you are doing it and you are not speaking up and telling someone about it, you're going to be looked into too. I can promise you that, because you are helping them at that point. It's disgusting. It's inexcusable. And you can sit there and claim ignorance all you want, but you know damn well the type of people that come into your place of work to get a tattoo.
While we're talking on tattoos, for former victims, there is an organization, a great organization that does cover up tattoos or laser removal to help victims get rid of their trafficking tattoos. That company is called Atlanta Redemption Inc. And they do what they can to help victims out, to help
Can
cover
someone
their
put that
scars
in
and move on with their
link
lives.
below?
Yep.
But let's talk about something that's similar to what we're talking about now. What happens to these victims when they are rescued, when they're found? And Heather, I believe you do have experience with talking to a lot of victims, don't you?
I do.
You wanna tell us a little bit about the emotional turmoil and process that they have to go through in order just to maybe come back to a civilized world if they can?
It does take a lot. Not everyone can do it. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's not for someone who gets easily triggered. But it is a process. It takes quite a long time, even just for them to be, okay with the situation. I mean, obviously the situation is not okay, but there's steps within the process that in order for them to move on, they have to understand and acknowledge what happened, and for them to understand that it wasn't their fault, because that does happen. They will blame themselves. Were they wearing the wrong thing? Did they say the wrong thing? Their religion, their color, of the skin, everything ties into it. So, and even with just that process of them understanding that it wasn't their fault, it is a long process. And, it's not something that can be easily done overnight or a week. It takes months. It does take years, and they'll still be affected by, the events that took place. They'll never fully, quote unquote, get over it. But there are techniques and, strategies and, workouts even, figuratively speaking, that can help, a victim or survivor to work on it, work past it, understand the triggers, understand, the terrors and everything like that.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the reason why victims won't tell law enforcement about what is happening to them or what has happened to them so law enforcement can get them is not because they're looking out for the trafficker all the time. It's because they don't want to relive it.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing that I have seen. They don't want to relive it through the questions. They automatically know, if I report this, I'm going to have to go to court. Am I going to see my abuser or, trafficker, whoever in court? Are they going to follow me after court? So that's a lot of the reason why it goes unreported. And they would honestly just rather deal with the abuse, the trafficking, the sexual abuse than report it.
I mean, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that, I'm sure victims get told this all the time, but, I'm going to harp on it again. Victims, if you are a victim of human trafficking and you haven't reported your trafficker, I guarantee you they are doing it to someone else as we speak right now. And
yes.
If you don't speak up, you are letting other innocent people, men, women, children, and the elderly experience what you experienced. And if you know you don't like it and you don't want to live like that, speak up so others don't have to fall into the same boat as you. Please.
Absolutely. And even with speaking up too, you know, survivors, they do need to understand that that's not something that they have to go through alone either. You know what I mean? Like, whether it's my organization or, you know, Bikers Against Abuse or you guys, you know, it's, we have no problem helping you, going with you to help you report this, you know, so that way there you don't feel alone. You're not scared. And
We'll even
if you
protect
are
you.
scared, yes. So that can be arranged. That can be there.
Absolutely. Does anybody else want to elaborate on anything? Because I think we pretty much came to the end, and we can get ready to close out here in a minute. Are there any questions out there from anybody?
I do have to agree with Shauna. It's not too late, you know, in the essence of reporting.
Absolutely. Does anybody else have anything to say?
No, I'm a wrap.
Okay, so, oh, go ahead, Heather.
I'm good.
Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Paul, can you go ahead and tell them your website?
Yep, the Facebook page is facebook.com/BAA International, and the website's bikersagainst.abuse.org.
Okay. Our website is www.htresponseteam.org. And our Facebook is facebook.com/Human Trafficking Response Team. Heather, you want to tell them about what your website is, or websites rather?
My website, I have them linked into one, but my website is threadsofserenity.com. And my Facebook page is www.facebook.com/threadsofserenity.
Okay, so all these are
Threadsofserenity.org, I'm sorry.
absolutely. These are all organizations, and we're trying to get more organizations put together where we can all work together under one roof and combat human trafficking. We are doing something. The Human Trafficking Response Team is doing an awareness challenge, and this awareness challenge is for people who own businesses. If you own a business and you have a logo and a website, I want you to send me the logo of your business and a link to your website, and the Human Trafficking Response Team will put it on our website at htresponseteam.org under the Partners tab. And it will be there for free so long as you do the following things. You take our logo and you take a link to our website that when you click on it, it takes you to the education tab of the Human Trafficking Response Team. You need to put that where it's visible and accessible on your website so people can click on it and educate themselves about human trafficking. That's why we're calling it the Awareness Challenge. You benefit from it, so anybody that comes through our website can see the businesses that maybe support us, or the businesses that that are helping in the fight for education about human trafficking, and other businesses can work together. Maybe another business has resources that someone else needs. You can all work together, and we're all about that free advertisement, so long as you put it up there to educate. And it can be any type of business. It can be anything from clothing, apparel, tactical gear. It can be food industry, anything. And that's what we're trying to do right now to spread awareness. So make sure you check everything out. Come to our site. If you got any questions, please reach out to any of our organizations. Everybody is highly intelligent. We know what we're doing, and we all work together. Stay tuned. There'll be this will be put on our Facebook. Bikers Against Abuse will have it on their Facebook, and we will actually have this on a YouTube channel. The Human Trafficking Response Team has a YouTube channel now, and we will have that on there and share the link soon. So make sure you're checking everything out. You can go back and see this video because it is being recorded. Other than that, I really appreciate everybody for joining us, and y'all have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Heather. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank y'all.
Bye, guys.